It's Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn. Getting into trouble as if trouble were his friend. It's Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn.
Persons attempting to find a motive in this story will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot out of a cannon by order of the author.
You don't know about me unless you read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That was a book made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth. Mainly. There was things which he stretched, but mainly he told the truth. I never seen anybody but lied one time or t'other. Unless it was Miss Watson, or maybe the Widow Douglas. The widow, she's the one who took me for her son, and vowed she'd civilize me. Boy, it was rough. Living in the house all the time and wearing those starchy clothes and being decent and regular. So I ran away. But then Tom Sawyer, he hunted me up and said he was going to start a band of robbers, and I might join if I'd go back to the widow's and be respectable. So I went back.
Come to supper, Huckleberry. Now, Miss Watson, you sit there. Oh, Huckleberry, you look very nice in those new clothes.
I can't do nothing but sweat and feel all cramped up.
Oh, don't say sweat, Huckleberry. Perspire if you must, but don't sweat.
Oh.
Oh, now fold your arms while the food is blessed.
Why, it don't look like there's anything the matter with it.
That's an awful thing to say, Huckleberry. Why can't you behave? And don't scrunch up like that, Huckleberry.
You know, Miss Watson, he's been trying to be a good boy, but it's so difficult for him.
Well, if he doesn't behave, he's going to the bad place someday. You remember that, Huckleberry?
Well, I wish I was there now.
Huckleberry, oh, that's a wicked thing to say. Why, I wouldn't say that for the whole world. No, I'm going to live in the good place.
Do you think Tom Sawyer'll go to the good place?
Oh, not by a considerable sight.
Well, I'm glad about that, 'cause I want him and me to be together.
Huckleberry.
Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn met up with the widow Douglas and Miss Watson, who tried their best to train him in the proper ways of men. But Huckleberry never took to civilizing.
With Miss Watson pecking at me and scolding me all the time, I got to feeling pretty uncomfortable and lonesome, too. After supper, I went up to my room with a piece of candle and put it on the table. The stars were shining and the leaves rustled in the woods, ever so mournful. And I heard an owl way off woo-wooing about somebody that was dead. And a whippoorwill. And a dog crying about somebody that was gonna die. And it made the cold shivers run over me. Well, after a long time, I heard the clock way off in the town go boom, boom, boom. 12 licks, and all still again, stiller than ever. Pretty soon, I heard a twig snap. Down in the dark amongst the trees, something was a-stirring. I sat still and listened. I put out the candle and scrambled out the window onto the shed. Then I slipped down to the ground and crawled in among the trees. And sure enough, there was Tom Sawyer waiting for me.
Come on, Huck. I've called a meeting of our robber gang.
Good. How many's in the gang, Tom?
7, if Jimmy Barnes don't go home.
What's the meeting about, Tom?
Well, everybody that wants to join has got to take an oath and write his name in blood.
So, Tom and me sneaked down to the old hut by the river, where the rest of the gang was to meet us. And pretty soon, everybody was there. All of us took the oath, and it was a real beautiful oath, too. And Tom said it showed we was a high-toned gang of robbers.
Now there's something else we got to do. Everybody in the gang has got to promise to sell his family as slaves if he ever tells the gang secrets.
Huh. Well, here's Huck Finn. He ain't got no family. What you gonna do about him, huh?
Well, he's got a father, hasn't he?
Yeah, he got a father, but you can't ever find him these days.
That's right. He used to lay drunk with the hogs in the Tangerd. But he hasn't been seen in these parts for a year or more. What are we gonna do about it, Huck?
Well, what about Miss Watson? I could sell her.
Hey, she'll do, Huckleberry. Huckleberry can sell Miss Watson.
Say, Tom, what's our line of business?
Well, mostly we'll attack the caravans and pillage the Spanish merchants and the rich Arabs.
What are you talking about, Tom? You lost me.
Don't you know nothing, Huck? I've read all about it in books. That's the way all robber gangs do business.
Hey, everybody, look at Jimmy Bonds. He fell asleep.
I want to go home. I don't want to be a robber no more.
Well, what do you know? This robber's a crybaby. Well, pretty soon Jimmy got mad and said he'd go straight home and tell all the secrets of the gang. But Tom gave him 5 cents to keep quiet, and Jimmy was happy again. Finally, we all went home for the night. We played robbers now and then for about a month, and then I resigned. The only Spanish merchants and rich Arabs we attacked turned out to be nothing but a Sunday school picnic. 3 or 4 months run along, and it was well into winter now. When I was coming home from school one day, I spied some tracks around the house. Well, I didn't notice anything at first, but then I saw there was a cross in the left boot heel to keep the devil away. Well, I knew that mark. When I lit my candle and went up to my room that night, there sat Pap, his own self. Oh, he was most 50, and he looked it. His hair was long and tangled and greasy and hung down, and you could see his eyes shining through like he was behind vines. There weren't no color in his face. Where his face showed, it was white. Not like another man's white, but a white to make a body sick. A white to make a body's flesh crawl. A tree-toed white. A fish belly white. And as for his clothes, just rags, that was all. 2 of his toes stuck through one of his boots, and he worked them now and then, and his hat was laying on the floor. An old black slouch hat with the top caved in like a lid.
Starchy clothes. You think you're a good deal of a big bug, don't you?
Well, maybe I am, and maybe I ain't.
Don't give me none of your lip. You put on considerable many frills since I've been away. I'll take you down a peg before I get done with you. You're educated, too, they say. You can read and write and do mathematics.
Well, I've been to school most all the time, and can spell and read and write a little.
Yeah.
And can say the multiplication tables up to 6 times 7 is 35. But I don't reckon I'll ever get any further than that if I live forever.
You think you're better than your father now, don't you? 'Cause he ain't been to school. Well, I'll take it out of you. Who told you to meddle with such highfalutin foolishness, hey? Who told you could?
The widow, she told me.
The widow, hey? Well, who told the widow she could put in her shovel about a thing that ain't none of her business?
Nobody never told her.
Well, looky here. You drop that school, you hear? You let me catch you fooling around with that school again and you'll get it. Your mother couldn't read, and she couldn't write neither before she died. Here ye are swelling yourself up like this. I ain't the man to stand it, you hear me? I say, take us. Let me hear you read.
The hazardous position of the army from the great extent and weakness of its lines was brought to the attention of General Washington, and he summoned a council of war.
It's so you can read. Had my doubts when you told me. Now, you stop that putting on frills. I won't have it. I'll lay for you, Miss Marty, and if I catch you about that school, I'll tan you good. First thing you know, you get religion, too. I never see such a son.
Old Pap took $1 from me, and the next day got drunk and went a-blowing around and cussing and whooping and carrying on. He kept it up all over town with a tin pan till most midnight, and then they tossed him in jail. Well, the new judge in town said he was going to make a new man of Pap. So he took him to his own house and dressed him up clean and nice and had him to breakfast and dinner and supper with a family. And the judge was just old pie to Pap, so to speak.
Whiskey is an evil, Mr. Finn, the devil's own tool. It'll put a man in his grave quicker than lightning.
Yep, I've been a fool, Judge. And I've fooled away my life. But now I'm a-going to turn over a new leaf and be a man nobody wouldn't be ashamed of. And I hope, Judge, you and your wife won't look down on me.
I could hug you for those words, Mr. Finn.
Oh, Mr. Finn, we're so happy.
I'm a man who's always been misunderstood.
Of course, Mr. Finn.
When a man's down, he needs sympathy and kindness, Judge.
That's right, Mr. Finn.
Oh, Mr. Finn, we're so happy.
You see this hand? Look at it, gentlemen and ladies all. Take a hold of it. Shake it. There's a hand that was the hand of a hog. But it ain't no more. It's the hand of a man that started in on a new life. And he'll die before he'll go back. You mark them words. Don't forget I said 'em. It's a clean hand now. Shake it. Don't be afeard.
I'll shake it, Mr. Finn.
Oh, let me kiss that hand, Mr. Finn.
And I'm a-signing this pledge with my mark to start a new life and turn away from that devil drink.
Mr. Finn, this is the holiest time on record.
Well, that night, they tucked Pap into bed in a beautiful spare room. But sometime in the night, he got powerful thirsty and clumb out the window and went into town and traded his new coat for a jug of red-eye and went back to the bedroom to drink it. Toward daylight, he crawled out again, drunk as a fiddler, and rolled off the porch and broke his left arm in 2 places, and most froze to death where somebody found him after sunup. And that spare room was a sight. Looked like a hog had been rooting around in it half the night. The judge was awful sore. He said he reckoned a body could reform Pap with a shotgun maybe, but he didn't know no other way. One day in the spring, Pap watched out for me by the school and catched me and took me upriver about 3 miles in a boat and crossed over t'other side where it was woody and there weren't no houses but an old log hut hidden in thick timber. We stayed there, and every little while he locked me in and went down to the store 3 miles and traded fish for whiskey, fetched it home and got drunk and had a noisy time and licked me Once he locked me in and was gone 3 days. Oh, it was dreadful lonesome. I tried to get out, but I couldn't find no way. Finally, Pap came back. He'd been drunk over in town and laid in the gutter all night, and was a sight to look at. A body would have thought he was Adam. He was just all mud. While I was cooking supper, the old man took a swig or two, got sort of warmed up, and then went to ripping again.
You call this a government? Why, just look at it and see what it's like. Here's the law standing ready to take a man's son away from him. A man's own son, which had all the trouble and all the expense of raising. Yes, just as that man has got that son raised at last, ready to go to work and begin to do something for him and give him a rest, the law ups and adopts that boy to a widow that ain't no relation. And they call that government.
But the widow, she only took me when you was gone so long.
Yeah, and she started teaching you to read and be fancy, too, when she knew that your own pap couldn't read. It's the government, I tell you. Why, letting people take a man's own son away from him, then teaching him to put on frills. Sometimes I've a mighty good notion just to leave the country for good and all. You bet, and I told him so.
Oh, Pap was a-going on so he never noticed where his old Limberlegs was taking him to. So he went head over heels over the tub of salt pork and barked both shins. And the rest of his speech was all the hottest kind of language. He hopped around considerable first, on one leg and then on t'other, holding first one shin and then t'other one. And at last, he let out with his left foot all of a sudden and fetched the tub a rattling kick. But it weren't good judgment, because that was the boot that had a couple of his toes leaking out the front end of it. So now he raised a howl that fairly made a body's hair raise. And down he went in the dirt, rolling and holding his toes. Well, Pap kept a-going at it, and then I kind of dozed off. All of a sudden, there was an awful scream. Oh, and I was up. There was Pap looking wild and skipping round every which way, yelling about snakes.
They're crawling up my legs. What beat me on the cheek? Take him off. Take him off. He's biting me on the neck.
Finally, he was plumb worn out and laid himself down, moaning kind of soft about the angel of death.
He's here. Don't touch me. No, hands off. Oh, they're cold. Let go. Oh, let a poor devil alone.
By and by, he rolled over and jumped up on his feet looking wild. Then he seen me and come after me, calling me the angel of death. Hey, no! Hey, I'm only Huck.
I'll get you now, you.
No, honest, really, it's just me, Huckleberry, no!
You won't get away this time. Oh, Pat Finn'll show the angel of death a real fight.
Well, he chased me round a spell, and pretty soon he was all worn out and fell on the floor to rest, saying he'd catch the angel of death in a minute. Then he fell asleep, and I sat there trembling, and planning how I could escape. I found a small knife, and every time Pap locked me in and went across river, I sawed a little more on one of the boards near the back of the cabin. Finally, one day he locked me in and took the boat. I went to work on that log, and 'fore he was cross river, I was out through the hole. I went down to the river, looking at Pap and his boat, which was just a speck on the water way over yonder. Then all at once, here comes a canoe. Just a beauty, too. About 13 or 14 feet long, riding high like a duck. It was a drift canoe, sure enough. And I swum out and brought it to shore. I judged I'd float downriver to Jackson Island, about 7 miles, and hide there. But I didn't want Pap a-comin' after me, nor the widow either, since I had sorta got used to being free and comfortable. So I decided to make it look like I'd been done in and the cabin robbed. I loaded everything I could in the canoe. Then I covered up the hole where I'd sawed my way out. Next, I took the axe and smashed in the door and stirred things up considerable, like the angel of death had been there his own self. It looked like a murder had been done for sure. I wish Tom Sawyer was there. I knowed he'd take an interest in this kind of business and throw in the fancy touches. I was just climbing into the canoe when here comes Pap, drunk as a snake and ornery. I could just make him out in the darkness. Oh, I didn't lose no time. The next minute I was a-spinning downstream, soft but quick, in the shade of the bank. The sun was up when I waked the next morning on Jackson Island, and I was feeling rested and satisfied. But just then... What was that? Oh, I knowed what the matter is. They're firing a cannon over the water, trying to make my carcass come to the top. Why, that ferry boat's floating with the current and coming right in here, close to the island.
Look sharp now. The current sets in the closest here. And maybe he's washed ashore and got tangled amongst the brush at the edge. I hope so, anyway.
I didn't hope so. Most everybody was on the boat, crowding up and leaning over the rail. Pap and the judge and even Tom Sawyer.
Stand away. We're going to let off another blast.
The cannon was right afore me and let off such a boom that it made me deaf with the noise. Oh, I'm pretty near blind with the smoke. If they'd have had some bullets in it, I reckon they'd have got the corpse they was after. The island was about 3 miles long, smack in the center of the river. And after 3 or 4 days, I finally got the urge to explore. I went fooling along in the deep woods, watching out for snakes, when all of a sudden I bounded right onto the ashes of a campfire that was still smoking. My heart jumped up amongst my lungs. I slunk back into the thick trees, watching and listening. But my heart was pounding so I couldn't hear nothing else. By and by, I says to myself, I'm a-gonna find out who 'tis that's here on this island with me. I'll find it out or bust. About midnight, I went creeping through the woods back to where I'd run across the campfire, stopping every minute or two to listen. By and by, sure enough, I catched a glimpse of fire away through the trees. When I was close enough to have a look, there laid a big man on the ground. It most gave me the fantoads. It was getting gray daylight when pretty soon he stretched himself and hove off the blanket. And it was Miss Watson's slave, Jim. Oh, was I glad to see him. Well, Jim.
Oh, don't you come close to me. I ain't never done no harm to a ghost. Now you go on and get in the river again where you belongs, and don't do nothing to old Jim, who was always your friend.
Shucks, Jim, I ain't no ghost. I warn't killed at all. Here, touch me.
Well, it do seem to be you, Huck. Lordy, but you gave me a fright. Well, looky here, Huck. Who was it that was killed in that china if it wasn't you?
There warn't nobody killed. I planned it, so Pap wouldn't come a-looking for me.
How long you been here?
Since the night I got killed, 3 or 4 days. But, Jim, how come you're over here?
Maybe maybe I better not tell.
Why, Jim?
Well, there's reasons. But you wouldn't tell 'em if I was to tell you, would you, Huck?
Blamed if I would, Jim.
Well, I believe you, Huck. I run off.
Jim!
But mine? You said you wouldn't tell. You know you said you wouldn't tell, Huck.
Well, I did. I said I wouldn't. And I'll stick to it. People might call me a low-down abolitionist, but that don't make no difference. But, Jim, why'd you do it?
Well, you see, Huck, old Miss Watson, she picks on me all the time and treats me pretty rough. But she always said she wouldn't sell me down to Orleans. But one night, I come creeping in pretty late, and I hear old Miss Watson saying to the widow that she was going to sell me if she could get $800 for me. And I'd seen a slave trader nosing around town considerable lately, Huck, and knew I was in trouble. So I lit out and come here.
Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn floated down the river after fooling Pappy Finn. Met up with a runaway by the name of Jim, who thought he'd seen a ghost instead of Huckleberry Finn.
Next morning, I reckoned I'd slip over to shore and find out what was a-going on.
Why don't you put on this old calico dress what belongs to my child, Huck, so's nobody'll know you?
Gee, that's a swell idea, Jim.
Here, put on this sunbonnet, too.
Well, I got all disguised, and I went over to the Illinois shore in the canoe just after dark. I slipped up and peeped in at the window of a little shanty, and there was a woman in there knitting by a candle, a stranger, which was luck for me.
Come in. Well, who are you?
Sarah Williams.
Take a chair. Why, are you alone? You'd better not be traveling alone at night. There was a young boy named Huckleberry Finn what was killed near here a few days ago.
Who done it?
Nobody knows for sure. Some think old Pat Finn did it.
No. Is that so?
Yeah, but now folks is a-thinking it was done by a runaway slave named Jim.
Why, he couldn't have done it.
Oh, but he run off about the time of the murder. In fact, I told my husband like as not that runaway is a-hiding over on Jackson Island. I seen smoke coming from there t'other day. So he's going over with the group late tonight. Say, what'd you say your name was, honey?
Mary Williams.
Hey, I thought you said it was Sarah before.
Yes'm, I did. Sarah Mary Williams.
Come now, what's your real name?
What, ma'am?
Well, I spotted you for a boy when you first stopped in here. Now, what's your real name?
George Peters, ma'am.
Well, try to remember it, George. Don't tell me it's Alexander in a few minutes. You do a pretty poor girl, though you might have fooled some men. Now, you trot along, Sarah Mary Williams, George Alexander Peters, and don't forget who you are.
After I left the shanty, I made a beeline for the canoe and took off for the island. Where Jim's camp had been, I started a good fire to fool the men who were coming. Then I jumped in the canoe and dug out for our place, 1.5 miles below, as hard as I could go. I roused Jim from his sleep. Get up and moving, Jim. There ain't a moment to lose.
What's up, Huck?
They're after us.